Hey, what is going on everybody, and welcome to Fantasia. For today, we're going to be jumping into another session of Epic 7. Now today, got another balance adjustment preview for you guys. Now, this time around, I'm going to just put a disclaimer out there, as some of you guys who have read the patch notes already know, just don't get your hopes up. There's not really much going on here. Like, not much at all. This is probably one of the weakest balanced adjustments we've had in a while. However, it doesn't mean that it's all garbage. Let's take a look. So there's a total of 7 heroes and 4 artifacts being changed, and as you can see from the list, we have Remnant Violet and Sylvan Vivian, and everyone else really doesn't matter. Now, there is an explanation for this that, if you looked at the past trends of balance adjustments, you'll see that whenever we get close to the World Championships, Smilegate always releases a weaker balanced patch. They always do this because they don't want to disrupt the meta before things start happening. And in fact, just tomorrow, there's the global qualifiers. So the Epic 7 World Championships is already underway. I can expect the next balance patch to be way more significant. The only complaint I have about this, honestly, is why is Fallen Cecilia not here? Like, why didn't they try to change Fallen Cecilia? She's like one of the mascots for this year's Epic 7 World Championships. It's just so weird. I can't understand Smilegate sometimes, but anyway, I'm sure people have already been bashing Smilegate enough. I'm not gonna jump on that train. You guys know me. I'm just here to give you guys my thoughts and opinions on things, so let's dive into it. Remnant Violet starting off, pretty simple change. I'm gonna keep everything simple and sweet as well. Basically, he no longer has an evasion buff that happens at the start of the match or at the end of every turn. He just has a straight up evasion increase, which is great. Puts him in line with even the most basic of 3 stars like Savior Aiden. So he's joining the rest of the crew. Good job, Violet. He also has damage dealt increased here for his skills, right? For his S1 and his S3, which is kind of interesting. He already was a really good damage dealer, but because I guess that's his only job and that's the only thing he can really do, this will be quite nice, I guess. Helps him burst through more units, which is good. I just want to be able to use Violet again, especially with New Moon Luna out with Ignore Res Strip and an unbuffable. It really would have made Violet obsolete for months, if years to come. Next up, Sylvan Sage Vivian. So let's take a look at her. She actually got a few changes, a couple things moved around too. So the first thing is now she has increased attack by 20% for every time she attacks, and this effect can stack up to 3 times. If this seems familiar to you, it's because they took that from her S3. So her S3 no longer does that now. It's now on the S1, which is kind of nice, and they increased the damage dealt, which is kind of good, because the only thing her S1 did was increase speed for a turn, and that's not really that great, especially if she doesn't scale with speed for damage. It does let her turn cycle, which is nice, but this will help her out a lot more. The insight, so her passive, here's where the big change is. It's kind of cool. So before, she gained 3 focus at the start of the battle, and at the start of the turn she gained a focus. Now, at the start of the battle, she has 5 focus, and at the end of every turn she gains an extra focus. So that's actually going to be kind of nice. It's not the so basically she starts with 5 focus, and when 5 focus is there, she's actually immune to debuffs, right? When she has a focus of 3 or higher, she's immune straight up, which is really cool. It's a really cool concept, and I wonder if she would actually see more play because of just this, a DPS that doesn't require a cleanser to help make them more viable, right? She's usually built on lifesteal, she's usually pretty self-sustaining, so this makes her even better at that. Now, one thing that is changed, though, is that after she's attacked, it decreases skill cooldowns to the cast by 1 turn. That's what she used to have. You no longer have that, but in response to that, your cooldowns are decreased on her S3, which is kind of good, because if people don't focus you, you're never getting your S3 up, right? So this allows you to kind of stack your attack, between your S3s, and your S3 is just enough that I think you should be able to get max stacks before your second S3, which is kind of cool. The other thing is that you have to be careful with her passive. Now to proc her passive, to decrease a focus and consume one, you have to have damage that is equivalent to 30% or more of her max health. It can be good and it can be bad. You don't want your focus to be consumed for like minuscule amounts of damage, so, you know, it is nice, but do keep in mind that if you're getting pelted by a lot of chip damage, like a bunch of knights or soul weavers or support units that hit you, then it's going to be harder to proc this to decrease the amount that you're suffered. So it's a double-edged sword. It's kind of good because you really just want this mitigation to happen because it mitigates by 70%. You want it to happen on really hard-hitting skills, right? Let's say a Violet S3 or something like that, a DPS unit's attack. This doesn't mitigate damage, though, by the way, for splash damage. So Karina is still good, like Hua Young's splash on her S1, Emma Luna's splash on her S2. That stuff can still definitely deal quite a bit to her, so you got to watch out for that. But yeah, moving on to her S3, now she just does damage dealt with more enemies around, and she recovers. The amount that's recovered with her healing is proportional to her attack. Now, what she used to do is she used to buff crit damage for everyone on the team, and this actually just kind of makes her a bit more self-sufficient as like a solo DPS unit. You can have a couple support units and mitigations on your team, and you can have a solo DPS Sylvan Sage Vivian, right? Can kind of be cool. She used to give herself an attack buff and give the critical hit damage buff to herself, but now she's just going to straight up deal more damage. So hopefully it's going to be enough in terms of scaling that it's actually quite significant. If they kept her S3 with the same damage, I think she'd be kind of lackluster, so we'll have to see. But Sylvan Sage Vivian, I'm kind of excited for. I don't know if this rework is enough, or if they're maybe planning an EE or something down the line. Same thing with Violet. It's such a minor change. It really can't even be considered like a full buff. It's just a tiny tweak, right, along with the damage dealt increase. But yeah, we'll see. They're trying to keep things on the down low, but I think some of these units here are a little too on the down low. Let's take a look. I'll go over these quick. So Yuna used to just increase combat readiness based on how many targets she hit. Now she just increases combat readiness straight up. And this is her S1, so 15% for herself and 5% for everybody else. Increased damage dealt, kind of cool. Next up, on her S2, the buff duration for her attack buff is increased from 2 turns to 3 turns. If you awaken it, you get a speed buff as well. Same thing as before, but it's just that now you also grant an extra turn. The granting extra turn actually just makes it so that the cooldown was increased by a turn, so really the turn cycling doesn't change, it's just that you have greater uptime of the attack and speed buff. Now, the downside here is they removed this. Her S3 used to say that a successful attack always results in a critical hit. They removed that here, so now if you want her S3 to actually hit hard, she needs crit rate, which is kind of weird because people used to build her as like a CR pushing unit on counter, which is why it's kind of nice that they removed this speed scaling. So people used to build her on counter, and a couple players, like some people, I think a couple people in Emperor Legend also kind of used her in seasons past before. It was kind of cool to see, but not many people do use her. This kind of makes her more versatile, removing the speed scaling. However, removing the successful attack resulting in a critical hit, that might impact her damage quite a bit, because you don't see any damage buffs or anything to the S3, so I'm kind of concerned about that. But yeah, it's just a little strange, but oh well. We'll see what that change for Yuna is. No, I have absolutely no idea. Her EE is changed as well. Instead of increasing by an additional 1% per target, now she just gives herself 5% more, so 20% when using her S1. It's not bad for turn cycling, but again, I'm just kind of curious. It makes her so stat hungry. I wonder how people are going to build her, if they build her at all. The second thing here is that now her S2 is unaffected by cooldown increase or decrease effects if you use this EE, instead of giving a chance to give greater attack buff to everyone for 2 turns. Again, not sure I feel about that. I don't know if anyone's resetting Yuna out of everyone on your team. We'll see, though. I would love to, again, if you're a Yuna user, or if you're a Yuna fan, let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. I don't know if this is a big win for her. I really don't know what the change was for. Next up, these are all PvE units, right? So Free Spirit Tieria, she basically gets Daydream Joker applied to her S1 and her S3. And her S2, the AoE, just has damage dealt. kind of cool. Her S3 also has damage dealt increased. Kind of nice. She'll be great for bossing, actually, and people might actually be able to fit her into Nightmare Raid teams, too. So we'll see about that. Next up, we have Meru, Fire Meru. So she is usually used in PvE now, but she did have a history of being used in Guild War defenses, and I don't think she'll come into arena defenses. I don't know, maybe, because these changes are quite significant. You see damage dealt increased across the board, S1, her S2, and her S3. It's quite nice. And they did remove these restrictions on her S2. Now, before, when there are 3 or fewer enemies, damage dealt increases as the enemies became fewer. That's why she was good in Guild War defenses. They start with 3 people on both sides. She's already dealing max damage here, right? In terms of increased damage here. And whenever she had an attack buff, she activates the attack again, but it'll decrease the damage that's dealt the second time around and can only be activated once, right? You could soul burn to increase the damage dealt, but then they removed that. They just give you straight up damage increases. Hopefully it's proportional, because her S2 did hit quite hard. Now, her S2 is probably going to hit quite harder because the second time you attack, it actually doesn't have the damage penalty anymore. It just, you grant an attack with the same skill. I think they still have this restriction. I'm not sure. They don't have it in text, but I'm assuming it's only working this way. And I don't think they're going to let you just keep using the attack over and over and over again, but I think it'll only be activated once this way. Yeah, I think. I don't think they're gonna let you S2 and just repeatedly S2. I think someone in the stove comments was saying like you can repeatedly S2 until the enemies die. I don't think that's what's gonna happen, but it might be a once per turn. But it doesn't say once per turn, so who knows? If you counter with your artifact, you know you're gonna be able to do it again. If you S2 and then you hit twice, so you could technically with Meru probably straight up kill a bunch of units with this in defense teams, right? Kind of cool. The Soul Burn is now on her S3, and her S3 just increased the duration of the buff by a turn. Good for Nightmare Raid, so people do use Meru in Nightmare Raid against Vera, I think, the worm boss. So she's going to be quite nice there, but aside from that, unless people put on defense teams, it's a really insignificant buff, but it's a little appreciated to see some PvE love to make things a bit easier on people. Next up, we have Camilla. She loses her skill null, and now she grants attack buff for 3 turns, and that's pretty much all that matters. The damage dealt increased on S3 doesn't matter. They even swapped out this -1 turn cooldown, which is hilarious to me, because no one used her S3. You only granted the attack buff, and then you just keep dual attacking with Camilla, because she dual attacks with the ally with the highest attack. So you just grant the attack buff, and you keep dual attacking. That's all you do. This just makes her better at that job. I really don't know why they changed the S3, but oh well. All right, moving on. No more Camilla. We have Aither, an even more insignificant unit. Probably for the newer players that are going to be maybe coming in as like a wave of new players come in for the summer, right, with the anniversary update around the corner, Epic 7 World Championships, ML Luna. They're probably just trying to make this as like a quote-unquote quality of life update for these newer players. So Aither no longer heals based on his attack, no longer scales with his attack, just straight up heals proportional to a target's max health, which is nice, which is cool. Now you no longer really need Aither fully built to get the most value from him. Kind of nice. All right, next up, last few things here are the 4 3-star artifacts. Let's go through these pretty quick. Mighty Yaksha now just increases attack straight up instead of attack and defense, which is alright, I guess. No one needed defense when they were farming with these artifacts early game anyway. The second thing is Goblin's Lamp. No longer recovers health. The ally of the lowest health gets recovered by 10 to 20%. Now, when you defeat somebody, there's a 50 to 100% chance to acquire a single measly soul. Great stuff. Could be good in Labyrinth, actually. That's probably where I'd assume it'd be used. Envoy's Pipe here no longer decreases damage received if you're below 50% health. Now you just decrease it straight up by 5 to 10% when attacked, which is not terrible, actually. Pretty good defensive artifact. Especially for like a PvE knight or something. Could be okay, early on in the game, at least. Ascending Axe, so increases critical hit chance of the caster by 5 to 10% after making a critical hit. That made absolutely no sense even back in the day. So now, thankfully, it's a reasonable, just straight up increases your critical hit chance by up to 12%. But yeah, that is legitimately it for the update. Honestly, if you made it this far into the video, I am so sorry for using up your precious time in the day. But if you appreciate little insights like this into balance patch adjustments or just updates in general, be sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out. But yeah, let me know what you think about Remnant Violet's change and Silver Sage Vivian's change, especially hers. She's very significant here, I think. Do you think they'll see use? I still think Silver Sage Vivian will struggle a little bit, but we'll have to see. Anyway, with that being said though, guys, I'll catch you in the next one. Take care.